I watched that film last week with Tim Robbins in it and Morgan Freeman about the guy who escapes from prison.
The Shawshank Redemption.
Thank you. I watched The Shawshank Redemption. And there's a moment in the film when Tim Robbins' character, Dufresne, says to the warden, that's so obtuse. He uses the word obtuse. He ends up having, as a result of calling the warden obtuse, he ends up spending 2 months in solitary confinement. And today I learned that one member of my family has been sending emails from an address that doesn't receive incoming emails. So I've been responding to these emails for a year, or maybe not quite a year, and wondering why I never heard back. And it just occurred to me that that's quite an obtuse thing to do. This is a podcast in which two friends talk about the pleasures, absurdities, and imperfections of being human. I'm Simon Ellis.
And I'm Lee Miller. Welcome to Midlifing. Okay, there's a lot that I have to try and work out here. Did this family member know that their email address could not receive?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say that's not obtuse, and I don't know who the family member is, and I don't want to pry, but that sounds pathological. It doesn't sound obtuse.
Well, it turns out that we, or I, meaning the rest of the family, crossed a line.
Oh.
And by that,
Thanks.
Yeah, that line being crossed meant that this family member decided to change the settings on their email so as to not receive incoming messages. Same family member complaining to friends of us, saying they never respond. I just don't. It's just happening now, and I cannot not. It's my heart's just going, what the? Yeah. Anyway, so this is a very short, and I'm not sure how much you can keep of this. It's fine if you do, but this is a very brief introduction into why do we have the concept of estates? It should all go back. It should all go back to the community, to the government. It's outrageous that inheritance exists. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I cannot tell you how I'm so het up. Such a strange word.
Het up is a very strange word, isn't it?
Heated?
Yeah.
Hotted?
Is het up just short for heated? I'm sure it isn't. I'm sure it has its own meaning, but I do like the idea that it's just like, it's the past tense of heated, but which heated is also the past tense of heated. What? I'm so confused. I heated a room. I het a room. What?
It doesn't sound
so
right, doesn't it? That room was very het up. Was well het. It was well het.
If you walked into a room that was het up, I don't think you'd want to stay. Okie dokie. Right. I'm just thinking about this, about how to convince you of something that I'm not convinced about. How do you... I mean, there's... Oh... It feels like I'm going to get halfway through a sentence for the next half an hour and then just go, okay, thanks, bye.
It doesn't. Well, I mean, I guess So one thing is to go. Well, okay. So what quantity of money from an estate from your dead parents is worth the stress and the mess of trying to understand? Like, I just don't. It's really. And then so there's another part of me which goes, well, I'm going to get a certain amount of money from Mum's estate, however long after she's dead, and I could just give that money away.
I think there is a complexity in your life that I cannot understand, because it's important to remember that I'm an only child.
Yes.
So there's a lack of anxiety around what is left to me. Because the decisions that my parents make in their will either be entirely
on you.
Well, yeah, it's either it will entirely be in my favour, as in I'll get everything, or it will be my job to apportion things out to the people that have cared about them and looked after them during their lives. And in either direction, I'm kind of fine with that.
Mm.
It will be unlikely that I'll rock up to the reading of the will, which won't be a reading, because it won't work like that. It will just be, I'll look at the will.
Wouldn't that be great if that were the case, though?
Ooh,
You'll just
yeah,
turn up
I
and
know.
it's just like in the
It's just me.
movies. You can't handle the truth.
Exactly.
Oh, no,
Whereas-
different movie.
different movie. But I know full well that the will is in a red biscuit box in the garage. So and it's not like I haven't been shown it on multiple occasions.
I love that your mother, I'm assuming your mother, put it in a biscuit box.
Of course. Yeah, and told me where it is. And showed it me and went through it in fine detail. It's unlikely that I'm going to open up the will and suddenly it's going to go, and the house is going
To Simon Ellis, who refuses it on moral grounds.
So I think I probably haven't had to think of it in that in those terms. And I'm also going to say, I think there is something about being the son of a factory worker and a butcher that makes my relationship to inherited wealth slightly different, because we're not talking about generational wealth here, in the sense of that this is not.
So you think there could be
generation after generation after generation after generation. What we are talking about is my parents.
Yeah.
Literally working
Bootstraps.
for everything they had, and they were able to do that. And I think we've had this conversation before, that they were born in a time where you could work your way out of poverty.
Yeah. Yeah.
To a certain degree, and I recognise that is because of where they were in history, but also where they were in the world. I know that I was just watching a video of Martin Luther King the other day, talking about the idea that the white peasants versus the black peasants, in the language he used in the interview that he had, were differently treated. That the white peasants from Europe were given land in America, in the United
Midwest or
States,
whatever, yeah.
because they chose to go there, whereas the African peasants, the black peasants, hadn't chosen to go there and they weren't given any land. So there was a sense that, there's two radically different practices in play for people of the same generation.
I like that you were watching a Martin Luther King documentary and I was watching The Shawshank Redemption.
I understand that I'm now reflecting upon, practices that are, wildly different around the world. But still, my parents, factory worker, butcher, my dad came from a council flat, a 2-bedroom council flat with 5 kids in Blackpool. There was no sense that he was inheriting anything.
Gotcha.
I think my relationship to inherited wealth is it's a very thin pattern of comfort.
Do you think, so are you suggesting that there should be, you get a 1 generation rule and then after that? I mean, it doesn't really work, does it?
No, I don't think I'm saying that. I think what I'm saying is that I feel very attacked right now.
Did you say attacked?
I'm joking. I'm totally joking.
I do.
What I
If
mean
there's
is
anything
that-
in my tone of voice, it's because
No. I'm so teasing you, Simon. I'm teasing.
But just so
What
you know,
I mean
just so
is-
that if
Yeah,
you're getting
no,
any
no.
sense of that, it's.
I'm really not.
I'm just
I'm really
I'm
not.
so
I'm
shocked.
really not.
I'm so shocked.
No,
I'm basically
no,
in shock right now. Yeah.
No, I understand. What I'm joking when I say I'm feeling really attached, because what I mean is that I might espouse a particular socialist perspective in a variety of things that I say, but you try and take my inheritance off me and I'll cut you off at the knees, because I am not very far away generationally from relative poverty.
Yeah. It's fresh. It's fresh.
Yeah.
But I always worry that that I think that's quite a middle class thing to do. And I'm careful. I don't want to accuse you of something, but I'm aware that I hear that a lot, and I think I say that I've also said it myself, which is that you and I are very well off. I mean, we're total 1%ers, and that it doesn't take much to be a 1%er. Like, it's surprising how low that value is. I can look it up. I can't remember off the top of my head, but your income doesn't have to be outrageous before you hit 1% on world scale, right? It's really, really low because there are so many people in the world who are on nothing, basically.
Absolutely.
and I guess I hear that, because I can also say, well, my father's father was a boilermaker. They immigrated from Scotland, and they had nothing. My mother's side, definitely more money on my mother's side, but I can't tell you that. And so there's something about the way in which we, and I'll just say, the middle class tend to hang on to those stories of how do I say, of lower classness or of poverty. And I wonder what you think about it. I'm not trying to be too provocative, but I mean it as a genuine kind of...
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree in the slightest. I'm not going to make any claims as a man with a PhD in 2 houses that I am working class. I'm not claiming that. But what I can say is that if we understand the Larkin idea that, your parents fuck you up, if we're happy to accept that kind of that psychological truth, it's difficult to pretend that I haven't been cooked in the broth of privation.
Yeah.
Which is not the same as me having not had things.
Oh, that's great.
I'm raised by people who... So my mum will talk about her mum going without food in order to make sure that her kids were fed.
Yeah.
She was a single parent post-war.
Yeah, it's real. It's not an abstraction.
Yeah, exactly. In a time when the welfare state didn't exist in the way that we understand it now. But there was only one income coming into the home. And she was a woman, so she was being paid less. But nevertheless, there were points in her life where she went without food in order to make sure that her kids were fed. It's that idea of being in the 1%, that idea of being avowedly middle class, that idea of being really privileged, all stuff that I understand. My lived experience is that. Also, I have been indoctrinated with certain narratives, which is you don't rent, you buy.
Mm.
That's something that my parents kind of inculcated into me from the youngest age. Rent is dead money. You need to put your money in bricks and mortar. That will never fail you. Always save more than you've spent. All of these kinds of, almost catechisms given to me.
Mm.
And they're so are they hardwired? I mean, I guess they're close to that. They're deep in there. They're deep in there. So when you ask me
when I come for your inheritance,
yeah, you're not really just coming for my inheritance.
Oh, that's great.
You're coming for the stability and the security that my working class parents have, I'm going to say, fought for. They've suffered privation that you and I couldn't begin to understand.
Hmm. We didn't. We only had cordial. We didn't have fresh orange juice. That's not a very good joke, is it? They're whatabouts. They're whatabouts. But what about? But what about?
Because I remember the first time I had what I thought was fresh orange juice, which is to say stuff that came from a carton that wasn't cordial.
It was probably called Just Juice or something like that, which is what we had in New Zealand. It was called Just Juice.
It was just juice.
Yeah,
but
it wasn't.
Had it on holiday.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Let's be
juice.
clear.
It was just sugar and water. And I had that on holiday in Cornwall when I was 8, and I was like, oh my God, this is living. But that was a holiday treat. And just to be super clear. Anyway, so
the high life.
It's hard for me to answer your question without acknowledging that it does something that sort of prickles me.
Yeah,
but in a way that is not my prickle. But if that makes sense.
But I can't. What I then can't do is, in my heart of hearts, do people still say that? In my heart of hearts, I can't mount an argument in favour of inheritance. I cannot. None of it makes sense to me because of the importance of family, and I've thought more times than I care to count in the last few years, which is that, as that old saying, which is family is for when you're young.
Oh wow,
it's pretty full on, isn't it?
I don't think I've ever heard that saying in my life.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense. It makes no sense to me now. No sense. 0 sense. Or another one is friends are God's way of apologizing for family. I mean, clearly again, just for some context, is that I'm very heated up. And so it's really hard for me to, I'm, it's basically a conversation on cortisol. And so it's quite, I mean, from that perspective, it's kind of interesting. What's it like to talk to Simon when he's high on cortisol?
It's really, I think it's a really, really, it's like it's burnt the politesse off the question.
What does that mean?
It means it's not a question that you've. It's not a question that you have
shined or
softened.
Refined.
Well,
or,
I was actually thinking softened because it's
right.
a pretty refined question. It's just very sharp.
Right. Okay.
It goes right there. It's like, oh, that went right between my ribs. So I think it's a.
I'm worried that this is what it might be like to work with me, or be a student of mine.
It's a really interesting question, Simon, and I don't think from a conceptual place I can defend it, except to say you're talking about having to unring the bell of thousands of years. And we're not just talking here about capitalism. We're talking about pre-capitalism. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, we're talking about notions of nobility and peasantry. We've got all of that sense of, we've got stuff that goes right back to,
yeah.
Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. That whole kind of like lineage of somebody begat somebody begat somebody begat somebody in the Bible. Just to choose one foundational creation text. I'm sure there are other versions out there. But that sense that it's this person can connect to that person, can connect to that person. And it's about, it's that lineage and hierarchy and who is valued and who is abandoned. And in a context where we can so easily be abandoned by the wider structures that, I'm not even sure that there were structures to hold us. It kind of makes sense that people have salted away a few gold coins and hid them under the bed.
Yeah, for family.
And that's what we've got. We've for family, to ensure that thing that I made is not going to starve. But of course, we've gone so far beyond that, and I completely understand the perspective.
Oh, I mean, because if I go back to that thought about, well, what is enough money? What is enough money that would make this worth it? It's quite a high amount in my mind, where I think, well, I could then, I could invest in a bakery, I could do all those things. I wouldn't have to work unless I wanted to, etc. Right? That's not the kind of money we're talking about, not even close. And yet, it's in my mind, none of it, not a penny of it, or a cent, as it's New Zealand dollars. Don't go very far. Is worth any of this cortisol.
So, can I ask a question then? Because you started with the with kind of a regulatory approach, which is like,
ban it all.
We ban it all. It's like, okay, I get how the cortisol might take you to that high level place.
And then I guess I'm trying to say I'm trying to play that. Oh, sorry, finish the question. I think I know what you mean.
It's okay. I was just trying to if the cortisol is so hot, what stops you sending the email to the account that can't get a response, which is, Dear X, don't factor me into any of this anymore. You can either split it between everybody else, set fire to it, or give it to the cat's home. I'm good. Take care. I really understand that this has been terribly difficult for you. We all have our perspectives, but
hang on, is this to the email address that doesn't get?
This is still to the email address that doesn't respond. Because I know that I know.
So it's basically it's like
But it's
like
I
the
know
sound
you're-
it's the sound of one hand clapping, basically, isn't it?
But it's a prayer, isn't it? It's a thing offered into the void.
Yes.
So you
yes.
can do the scorched
It is
earth
the, It's the
version.
sound of a tree falling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you could do, but it might have value to you to just be able to go, I understand that you're in pain. I understand that pain is something that you're trying to mete out to everybody else. I just want you to know I don't need to be part of this anymore, sweetheart. You take it, do with it what you will. I'm done. It's all yours now. Take care. What stops you?
It's very tempting. The only thing, which I guess is what this conversation is about, is that my tendency, and I think it's why when I hear you describe particular situations, which we've talked about, where I hear intransigence, and my tendency towards intransigence is so strong, and that I recognize it in the various in the kinds of positive aspects, because you could say, what are principles if not a version of intransigence? And so there's a part of me which thinks, oh yeah, this is the answer. I'm totally going to send that email into the void and let everyone know. Because that is super. I cannot tell you how delightfully freeing that feels. But the thing about the intransigence is that there's an aspect of me which is like, no, that's not right. How dare I feel like I'm effectively, as we say when we're in these kinds of het-up situations, forced into that kind of response. I'm going to hold my ground here, that kind of. And so this is not right, Even if it's for $4, that's not right.
Yeah, and that's why I come back to the that place where I started from, which is you are asking the worst person in the world.
Can we get someone on who would be who would be better than you?
We could get Bob, because Bob's the eldest of three, who is the furthest away from her family in lots of ways. And I mean that geographically, because she lives in the southwest, they live in the northwest. They remain very, very closely geolocated, and also they work together. So there is that sense that I mean, I know it's not countries away, but she might have a perspective that would be different to mine. I don't know, because we haven't had that conversation about inheritance across families, mostly because the noise that comes from my family is so loud. Because my mum will take Bob into the room and go, okay, pick the jewellery that you want before I die.
Yeah, etc.
So yeah, I'm really sorry that I can't hold you in this conversation, because it's alien to me through two lenses.
Yeah.
One is that I will never encounter it. Because honestly, if my parents wrote me out of the will at this point, there would have been a reason for it. There would have been something catastrophic that had happened between now and the point of their death.
Probably
and I would
know
go,
that.
That's a fair, and I would say, fair point.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, as I say, generationally, I'm too close to poverty to not see the value of passing something down.
Sure.
Whilst still seeing the hypocrisy of it.
There's a Maori word, matamua, and it kind of means elder, but it also means literally firstborn or eldest child, and makes me think of the kind of tremendous weight and that we bestow, either intentionally or culturally, on that person, and that sort of carrying that the firstborn has, whether they like it or not. Look after your little brother, all that kind of stuff, which gets becomes the air that they breathe, and as we have talked about it before, you get to be both youngest and oldest, and it's a very peculiar. In fact, I guess single children, perhaps not in China, are kind of rare. I would have thought, at least in the West.
It's quite interesting when I bump into other only children that
only
children.
Sorry, that's the word we use. Yeah.
Single children. It's also true.
It's not quite right, is it?
Well, we are single in the sense that there's in the familial dynamic, but there is something quite interesting about finding middle-aged only children. I was working with one not long ago, and there is a sense of real recognition of the dynamic that is being played out when you are a middle-aged only child. The caring responsibilities that are not shared by anybody else, and I know that can happen also in multi-child households where one person carries the burden of caring for parents. So I know that's
was
not
asked
specific.
to carry the burden. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's not specific to being an only child, but an only child doesn't have anybody else. They can't shrug that responsibility. Yeah, if that makes sense,
that's right.
But also, I think there is we have a different relationship with our parents because they're part of a little gang, which is different because it's and the anxieties, the tensions, and all of those sorts of things are not defrayed by bumping into another body that you can. I could never walk into a room and say to somebody else, "Oh my God, they're doing my fucking nut in," because there was nobody to say that to, and you can't say to your dad, "My mum's doing my fucking nut in," because your dad goes, "That's my wife you're talking about."